We're talking to men today. Yeah, maybe that's you. I'm Dr. Carol. Thank you for joining me in this episode. If you're a woman, you're welcome to listen in, and we have a few thoughts, especially for women, later on in this conversation. To help me talk to men, I have a fascinating and just vibrant guest, Jim Ramos. Jim is a best-selling author, a speaker, and a founder of Men in the Arena nonprofit ministry. He's written over 9 books. His focus has been helping equip men to be who God has called them to be. And he's very straightforward. He talks to men, man to man. And you'll see that in this conversation. Early on in Jim's marriage to his wife, Shanna, and they've been married well over 30 years. Early on in their marriage, they didn't want to stay married. Things were going very badly. But a few years into their marriage, Jim came to a very significant mindset shift. He'll explain that and how that means everything in relationship with a woman in particular. But we get into some stuff like talking about sex, purpose, what God put men here to do, some of those real deep heart issues. And I think you will find this challenging and encouraging. Now, you may hear a little bit of audio scramble in my audio. Jim's audio is fine. But through this conversation, give us a little grace. Jim's talking most of the time, but there's moments when you hear some challenges with mine. But here is Jim Ramos. Jim Ramos, what a great opportunity to have this conversation today. You know, you and I have gotten to know each other recently in a few ways. I've been on your program. This is going to be fun. Thank you for being here.
Oh, as the young people say, it's going to be fire.
Yeah, well, as I have checked out a few of your books and your podcasts and just so much good that you are doing in the Men in the Arena world, I saw some stuff that you and your wife, although you've been married 31 years, it didn't start out real well. So maybe let's just start there about, your marriage, what you expected when you got married, and then how things went.
Yeah, I mean, we tried to do it right. I was in ministry. I was coaching football. We were we were first generation Christians. We were both trying to figure it out. Mm-hmm. We fell in love very fast. She was on my youth staff with Youth for Christ in USA and Campus Life, and fell in love. I told her I loved her on the first date. I told her I was going to marry her on the first date.
Wow.
My kids told me I don't have any game, but I said, well, where'd you come from? Type of thing. We got married 9 months after I told her I loved her on that first date. I wish we would have had a little more counseling from older, wiser people, because we entered into marriage with our own dysfunctional family of origins. And so I thought okay, hey, I've been waiting. I became a Christian. I stopped all sexual, physical relationships. And for 3 years, I prayed for my wife, and I found her, and I have not had intercourse with her during our dating period. So I'm almost 4 years into this, abstinence thing. And I was so excited to get married because I could finally have sex. I could finally have somebody who could, I was a cook during high school and college, but man, it's so good. I could finally have somebody cook for me and make my bed. And man, it's going to be all about me. This is going to be so awesome. And we went on our honeymoon, and man, it was rough. We label it the honeymoon from hell.
Wow.
It was rough. We went into a national park because we had no money, and we had to pay for showers, and we fought the whole time because she kept beating me in cards, and I was accusing her of cheating, and it was just rough. And we came back. I remember we came back from our honeymoon, and I was like, "Hey, what's what's for dinner?" And she's like, "Well, hey, I don't cook. You're the cook. I don't cook." I go, "You don't cook?" I'm like, "Oh man." I go, "Well, okay." There's top ramen in the cupboard, and then I said, I'm gonna go take a nap. And we were in this little teeny apartment with no air conditioning. And she said, well, don't sleep on the duvet cover. What's a duvet cover? Well, and don't sleep on those decorative pillows. Use your college pillow to sleep on. What? This is a what? I couldn't believe I couldn't sleep on this fancy bed that I finally I was slept in a sleeping bag for 4 years of college. Went in to take a shower. She said, don't use those hanging on the towels on the wall there, because those are decorative. What? Yeah, use your college, So everything I thought I was going to have, I didn't have. I said, hey, let's make love. She goes, whoa, what? Oh, no. Hey, boy, it doesn't work like that, And so, man, I realized early on that marriage was not about me.
Mm.
because I thought, oh, it was about me, and that probably 2-year process led to a lot of struggle. And I'm going to confess something that breaks my heart. And it just breaks my heart because I'm married to one of the most wonderful human beings on the planet, and she's the most important person in my life. But there was a period in those first couple of years of marriage while I was a pastor, coaching football, trying to be a role model, that I asked God to take her out. I just was like,
Wow.
and you have experienced that in your own personal life. And so you can imagine how evil that prayer was, that I would pray
Wow.
that, or think that or consider that. And so we were just in a bad, because I was committed to not getting divorced. So I'm like, well, maybe a car wreck, or I don't know. I just was so desperate. I remember pounding on the steering wheel of her car because I had to sell my car because we didn't have the money for 2 cars, and she won, and just asking God, I'm going to live with somebody for 70 years who I hate.
Wow.
And I decided
Wow.
in her Jetta, pounding that steering wheel, I decided, okay, I can either live with a person I hate for 70 years, or I can figure out how to change this.
Yeah.
And I decided to change it.
Yeah, Jim, I want to go there in a second, but first I want to pause because I think there are a lot of Christian young people who imagine just like you. I'm going to get married and life is going to be wonderful. I'm going to have legitimate sex now whenever I want it. I'm going to have somebody to take care of me. This is going to be your best life now. If I do things God's way, well, he's going to give me the life that I want.
And it's funny. My wife and I joke because we actually speak at marriage things and do different
Uh-huh.
things together now. And I'll get up there and I'll say, man, I married an angel and I woke up with Satan. And then she'll say, well, I married my dream guy and I woke up in a nightmare. And that's how we felt because we realized that person cannot make my life whole.
Yes.
But we bought into this myth that this Hollywood lie that we get taught. You get married, you ride off in the sunset singing some praise music, and everything is a wonderful, wonderful world, and it's just so fake, and it's such a lie. Marriage is so much hard work. I believe now that marriage is not about happiness, it's about holiness. And so for me, it's not about what she can do for me, it's about what I can do to serve her. And that
Yeah.
was the hinge point in our relationship when I decided that even if she never reciprocates for the next 70 years, I kind of create a contest in my head. I'm going to outlove her and outserve her, even if
Wow.
she doesn't reciprocate, because I can't, if she's not going to make me happy, at least I can make her happy. And at least that'll lessen the severity of the marriage on me. And so, but that decision changed the whole game because I didn't realize this, but her love language is acts of service. So the moment I started making her coffee every morning, just the way she liked it, it really began to change a lot of our marriage. I mean, we had other issues. We
Yeah.
had sexual expectation issues and other things we've had to work through. But that was a game changer. And I realized, oh, marriage isn't about me. The Bible says it's about me being Christ to her and
Yeah.
giving myself up for her.
Wow.
Oh,
Jim,
wow.
how did that get through to your head? Because I work with a lot of married people, men and women and couples, and I think this is very common. If I'm not happy, my spouse isn't doing what they're supposed to do to make me happy. How did that change in your head?
Well, I think there's two things, Carol. The first thing is you've got to immerse yourself in the Bible.
Mhm.
Specifically, there are 3 sections in the Bible called household codes:
Yep.
Colossians 3, 1 Peter 3, and Ephesians chapter 5, verses 22 to 33. And when you immerse yourself in there and you see things in there like be Christ to your wife, I'm speaking to the men right now. Love your wife as Christ loved the church, cherish her as your own body. It's really funny in that in Ephesians 5, the men are told 4 or 5 times to love their wives. Women
Yep.
are never told to love their husbands. They're told to respect their husbands once. And I think it's because there's a default with men to respect, but men don't default to love, where women
Mhm.
default to love and not respect. So God asks us to do the hard thing. So
Mhm.
I went to the word and I started studying marriage there. And then I'll be honest with you, I just prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed. And I've been praying for this woman for 3 years before I met her, praying for her during our dating process. And I was in a Promise Keepers event in LA Coliseum with 80,000 men, and it was 85 degrees. And this black preacher came out and he was wearing a robe, like a Presbyterian type of thing.
Yep. Yep.
He's screaming he must have said it 50 times. You got to out love, you got to out serve your wife. And I'll be honest with you, I just wasn't connecting with him. I wasn't connecting with the robe. I wasn't connecting with the repetitive screaming. And about 40 minutes into his screaming, God spoke to me.
Mm.
In the midst of 80,000 guys,
Yeah.
70,000 guys, God spoke to my heart, and you'll never guess what he said. He said, you got to outlove and outserve your wife. So I want to find this pastor someday and shake his hand because God used him to change my life. And so I think a lot of times, whether we're a man or a woman in a relationship that's not what we expected it to be, we need to go to the Word. We need to realize what marriage in the Bible is.
Yeah.
Our role as a husband or a wife, and we need to cry out to God and have a God moment. We just need to have God moments, and we need to trust the God of the universe, that if he really is who he says he is in the Bible, if we really believe that his character and nature that he describes of himself, if we really believe that is true, then God can do anything. He can save and resurrect a dead marriage. He does it all the time. He loves doing that. So that's what happened to me.
Yeah. I sometimes say to couples, marriage is about learning to love well. It's not primarily about getting your needs met. In a godly marriage where both people are following Jesus, many of your needs very well may get met, but that's not the point. The point is learning to love well. You can learn to love well even outside of marriage, but marriage is almost a place where if it is going to work, you have to learn that.
Well, and when you say love well, what I hear you saying is love without an expectation of reciprocation.
Yes.
If we if we're a ledger person, or if we're playing this love bank game, I mean, the love bank makes sense to me, and I think it does function. But in a Christian marriage, it's not about ledger. It's not about the love bank. It's about loving without expectation of reciprocation, which really, and theologically, is dying to self.
That's good.
So,
That's good.
I've got to die to me to give to her.
Yeah. I hear from men regularly on our website, the people who I work with individually, a lot of men, since we're talking to men today, and that's your area of ministry in particular, feel like, well, my wife isn't doing what she needs to do for me. And we've talked about that. You talk to men about coming closer to your wife, you making the move. I was listening to one of your programs, and you said she needs to know you want her and not it.
Yes.
How do guys do that? What does that look like?
So, okay. So again, I'm great at confession. I mean, I'm so good at confession. So earlier in our marriage, in those first 2 years, even maybe into 8 years into our marriage, 10 years into our marriage, we had this unwritten rule that we would sit on the couch at night. And typically what I would do is I would rub her feet after the kids went to bed, because we started having children pretty fast.
Yep.
I would rub her feet, rub her shoulders, and that meant after we have a massage, we're going to go make love. And so we had this ledger thing going.
Yep.
That if I give you what you want, you're going to give me what I want. Because we're having kids. I had during those, when we were in our 20s and 30s, I had a far greater drive sexually than her, because she's raising children. She's got kids hanging all over. And so she would say, okay. So I remember many times when I'd start rubbing her shoulders and she'd go, oh, I don't have sex tonight. So it became that Pavlovian in a sense. And what I realized there is I wanted it from her to have release. And it wasn't until I realized I need to just rub her feet and give her a back rub. I mean, that's my wife. For some guys, it may be mowing the lawn, doing the dishes, watching the kids, engaging after work. But for me, it was touching my wife, showing her affection without an expectation. When I began to rub her feet, rub her shoulders, because I loved her and I wanted to pour myself into her, she began, without me thinking this would ever happen, she began to initiate sexually with me, or just say, it just changed the whole game, because what happened was I began to pursue her. See, women are made to be pursued, men are made to conquer. So the problem that we as men have is when we get the ring on the finger, we go, okay, what's next? When women get the ring on the finger, they begin to change and try to take this man who's rough and they try to refine him, right? So there's a tension. The guy's like, I don't want to be refined. You fell in love with me and you got married to me,
Yeah.
but he wants to move on to the other things. And that's the mistake that men make with their wives and their daughters.
Yeah.
Is that these women are made by God to be pursued. They're worthy. They're like the bride. There are brides. I still call my wife my bride, not my wife. She's my bride because it reminds me the bride of Christ. The church is the bride of Christ. The church needs to pursue the bride of Christ. I, as a man, need to pursue my bride. And so it's a constant game of texting her every day. I love you, honey. I love you more. Every time she flies as a flight attendant, she's texting me, I love you. And then I say, I love you more. It's always, every time we go to bed at night, I'm touching her, just things like that say, you know what? You are the only woman in my life, and you are worthy to be pursued. Even though you've got your 11s and your crow's feet and all these names you give your wrinkles, you still are gorgeous and worthy to be pursued. And this is what and one of the things, another way that we need to pursue our wives is we need to tell them, what I've experienced with my wife is that women are like casting vision as a leader. They leak, their beauty leaks. So I have to tell her constantly, you're beautiful, you're beautiful, you're beautiful, because there's this thing about a woman's beauty when they stare at themselves for hours every week in the mirror, critiquing every line, every wrinkle, every feature. And it's us as men to say, I love you, I pursue you, I want you. And that changes the game. I've actually seen my wife get more beautiful in her 50s than in her 20s comparatively to the women, as she's aged. And I really believe that it's her countenance, because I have done a good job at, tapping her behind when she walks by, or, I just do little things that say, oh man, you are the one still.
Yeah, that is so good. That is so good, Jim. I have written about if you walk into, a grocery store or a line at the bank, if you are still banking in person or whatever, and you just look at a group of people, you can make a pretty good guess about what their sex life is like. And you can tell, for example, especially I think for a woman, if she feels confident, if her husband is building into her and her face is shining and she just walks with a presence, it does something to a woman's soul for her husband to see her as beautiful, not again to get something for himself, but pouring into her. A woman can tell. Another thing a woman can tell, and you've alluded to this, a woman can pick up immediately if he is touching her or speaking to her or pursuing her to get something. If he wants sex from her and that's the reason, she can smell it a mile away. But if it is giving, it is a very different experience in a woman's heart. You alluded to this, but I want to ask again, non-sexual touch. I think there's a lot of guys that say non-sexual touch. What else is touching for? Can you talk about that? Because a woman can really tell the difference, and it's a big deal.
Every man has the love language of physical touch. I'm like, come on, bro, stop it. You're an idiot. No, honestly, I will tap my wife's behind. She'll bend over to pick up something in the pantry, and I'll be like, oh, dang. I just say, even if I touch her breasts or her hair, anything, it's just like a drive-by. You're just doing a little drive-by pat, a little drive-by touch. In the car, you're just reaching over and just grazing her hand in the car. It's those little things. It's when she's sitting on the couch, you go and sit next to her. It's those little things. And I think, we can serve ourselves much better as men if we just said, man, honey, I'm so drawn to you. I just want to make love to you, and just verbally just tell her and then touch her. But she, just maybe communicate with that instead of playing some subversive middle school game that says, hey, you want to come over and watch Netflix and chill? I think we need to stop playing that game. And I don't know. My wife and we've been married 32 years almost, and it's to the point now where I just kind of tell her, or for my wife, it was like, hey, honey, I really need you. I want to make love. And I tell her in the morning so she can mentally prepare for it at night. Because for my wife, again, every woman is different. She needed to play it out in her brain and mentally prepare because she's got kids. Well, now 32 years later, she's become the aggressor. And so it's really flipped. So now it's really been interesting to see how it changes.
Yeah.
But I would say for us as men, we just have to, if we want to make love to our wives, we'd probably be better served just flat out telling them, maybe in the morning before work, and then, something besides begging for it,
Yes.
or something, immature and subversive, and
Yeah.
that type of thing.
You're talking about sex, and there is
Yes.
good research showing that couples who actually talk about it enjoy it more and do it more.
Well,
Yeah.
it's really funny in our marriage. So that's how we are, because sometimes she will want certain things
Mhm.
and sometimes she won't. And sometimes she'll want the same thing done a certain way. And it's same thing with me. And so we find ourselves speaking to each other during that process often.
Good.
And we communicate differently. She'll actually speak the words, and I won't necessarily speak the words, but we communicate differently, but we communicate to each other.
Yes.
And so, and then we will oftentimes not evaluate, but like, oh wow, that was cool. That didn't work. We just talk about it. We keep short accounts in every aspect of our life,
Good.
even love making.
That's good. That's
Yeah.
really good. Um, since we're talking about sex, and there's a couple other things I want to ask you about too, but since we're talking about this, talk to the guy who's married and he's not getting enough from his wife, or maybe he's not married. I'm a woman and I talk to a lot of guys, but you're a guy. I haven't felt in my body the kind of sexual urge a man has. I have a different kind of sexual experience, but you as a guy, if your wife is not open to sex tonight, or if you are not married right now, talk to the guys who are wrestling with that sexual drive inside. Can you make it? Do you have to go to porn? Or find somebody else? Talk to the guys who are wrestling with that.
Oh man. Okay.
The big, yeah.
I'm hesitated to say something because I don't want to get in trouble here, because I might have a minority view on this, but I know for me personally, as a single man who was very active through college, when I was praying for my wife in those 3 years before I met her and I had declared abstinence, for the single guys I'm talking right now, for me, and I had no access to pornography. There was back then that was, you had to go rent a movie or something or buy a magazine, and I wasn't going to do any of that. So for me, I had no access to porn. But even during that phase, for me, masturbation was a tool to release that drive. And that may be not what you want to hear. I have guys go, well, you can't do that without lusting. I go, oh yeah, when you're 23, you can. And so for me, that was a tool for me. Pornography always is a sin to me because you're imagining yourself in that scene.
Yep.
So, but the Bible doesn't talk about masturbation. So there's a gray area there. It talks about lust. And so I think that it can be a tool for the single guy, but we have put so much shame and guilt. We won't even say the word. Like even in your book, you said the M word. We don't even like to say the word, but we need to talk about that word, because if the Bible's silent, then we've got to figure out why it's silent. And so for the single guys, I would say that. For the married guys, I would say that could be a tool without porn involved. I mean, no porn, but I have several of my friends, many actually, that are in sexless marriages, that with women they love, and they've loved them for decades.
Yeah.
And it comes back to this: marriage is not about your happiness, it is about your holiness.
Yes.
I have a man whose wife has Parkinson's. He has not made love to her for 10 years, but he's caring for her and cherishing her. I have another friend whose wife got in a real bad accident when they were first married, and she can't even, her hips were broken, and she can't actually even have sex. She can't even get her body in a position to have sex, and he loves her and cherishes her. And so I think we still need to do that without, this is the hard part.
Yep.
Without an expectation of reciprocation. Now, if we are married, conversely, I'll say this to the women. I mean, if we are, pursuing Christ as a godly woman, whether we are physically able to make love or not, I mean, there are still ways to satisfy your husband, because I think a woman also needs to serve her husband. It works both ways. I'm just saying that we can't serve our spouses with an expectation of reciprocation.
Right.
And that's the caveat. Like I'm telling women, yes, you need to do this. And I'm telling men, yes, you need to do this. But I'm saying there's a wall here, and the wall is without expectation, reciprocation.
Yeah.
And so there were many times in our marriage where my wife would make love to me out of service because she loved me and wanted to serve me. I never demanded that, like, hey, there's a verse in the Bible in 1 Corinthians 7. It talks about do not
Oh
deprive
boy.
each other.
Yeah, Jim.
So there's that verse.
I was about to say 1 Corinthians 7.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
That's well, so there's this verse, and a lot of Christian guys will go, hey, baby, hey, look at, hey, that verse says, and if you want to love Jesus, you need to get down here. And
Yep.
so here's the pushback I have on that. So as we get older, a lot of women will have more drive than their husbands. So in our relationship, that has flipped. And so now I'm going, okay, hey, honey, I'm going to take, whatever, but here's my thought. Here's the challenge I have for guys. We read that passage and we go, oh, that means sex, which means for a man, that means sex equals orgasm, because when we have sex, we orgasm probably 95, 99%. I don't know, a lot, most of the time. What if we take a biblical approach to that verse and say, if I'm supposed to be Christ to my wife, if I'm supposed to serve my wife, if I'm supposed to love my wife as Christ loved the church, what if that verse doesn't mean sex? What if it means orgasm? Well, then the men listening are just cringing right now because they're doing horribly at that.
Yeah.
Of bringing their wife through a process, opening her spirit, nurturing her soul, giving her affection without reciprocation. This is sometimes a whole day process, bringing her up to a point where she climaxes because of her deep love for you and how worthy and valued she feels by you. It's way more for a woman. It's a soul experience for a woman, way more than a man's experience. That's why we say women are like crock pots, men are like microwaves. For women, there's a process she has to go through, and mature Christian men who've been married to women for their woman for years know this, right? And so, and it can even be like, hey, honey, you wake up in the morning on a Thursday. Oh, honey, I love you so much. I want to make love to you. You're so beautiful. And then throughout the day, you're just pursuing her. So she knows you want to make love to her, and you're pursuing her throughout the day. So, but I think for guys that are in sexless marriages or marriages that are strained, I would say, well, if your wife does not have a physical issue, then I would wonder, how's your marriage doing? How are you doing at actually pursuing her? Because I have found personally that when my wives, this is going to sound derogatory. I don't want it to sound derogatory, but when my wife's spirit is closed, her legs and everything else with it is closed. She's just closed. So I need to open up her spirit. So a lot of guys that are struggling in their marriages are also struggling sexually because their wives' spirits are closed, and they need to open up her spirit so that she will envelop you physically, spiritually, and emotionally. And I think guys need to figure this part out.
That is good, Jim. I said a different way, I will often tell guys, pursue the relationship, not the moment of sex. That it's almost always, there are a few exceptions, but almost always a relationship issue, much more than a sex issue. And as an OBGYN, I will also say that there are other ways to experience physical intimacy and sexual enjoyment, even if intercourse becomes impossible in most cases. So this is a lot more than, a particular act of intercourse. And I appreciate you saying that. You also, in your ministry, Men in the Arena, there's a lot in what you do about bold, about strong. There's also been some talk out in culture and in the church about toxic masculinity. Will you talk about the difference? This certainly applies to sex, but broadening it for a moment. The difference between the kind of strong men you're talking about and toxic masculinity.
So I believe that toxic masculinity is oxymoronic. Because if you actually look up the word masculine in the dictionary, it describes men doing manly things.
Yeah.
So I believe in toxic maleness.
Okay.
So males are the source of 90% of the world's problems, but men are the solution. So
Wow.
I designate those two. They're different. It's like when I go hunting, I'm a hunter. When I go hunting, I can see a little buck like this. And yeah, it's a little legal buck. He's a 1-year-old buck and he's sitting there with his mommy or something. That's a legal buck, but he's not like the big trophy buck. That guy's alone. He's majestic. It's a different species, although genetically they're the same. And what I would say is that males are born, men are made. And men, generally speaking, are not toxic. They're the ones dying for their countries. They're the ones rescuing people. They're the ones rescuing the women sex trafficked. They're the ones living pure
Yes.
lives. They're the ones engaged with their children. They're the ones loving one woman. They're the ones waiting till they're married to have sex. It's the males. And the problem is we oftentimes will backslide into our maleness, right? I mean, I do it all the time. We all do that, but we're telling these guys, hey, the Bible says act like men in 1 Corinthians 16:13. And it's the only time that word is mentioned. And some Bibles inaccurately translate that be courageous. That's not what the word means. It's the word androzathe. It literally means do a manly thing. So we'll translate that to courage, but that's not what it means. And so I would just tell these guys, act like a man. Men don't defer. They don't defer their marriage to the church or their children to the church. They let the church come alongside, but they lead the way. They love their wife. They don't defer loving their wife to her friends or her internet relationships or her children or her church. They are the ones that lean into that. And
Yeah.
so and so when you talked about bold and strong, I actually thought you were going to talk about women. Here's what
We'll
I'll
talk
say
about
about
women
this.
in a second, but yeah.
Well, okay, because I think that the way I'm a strong man, I always was a good man. I did well in everything I did, but my wife has made me the man I could never have been without her, because her strength and her pushing me and seeing something more in me has created a man I never could have been without her. We've talked about this, like women I dated in the past. I thought if I married her, my life would have been horrible. She was a pushover, and if you look at in history, people say Sam Colt, won the West, with his pistol, but really in the Victorian era where there was a revival happening in the late 1800s, and these women were coming out West who loved Jesus, and they're the ones that changed the West because they refused to bow down to culture and they called men up. And I think this is the problem with our culture is we have weak men and we have weak women, and it's perpetuating this cycle of dysfunction and, to coin a word that you use, toxicity. So we need strong women, bold women, courageous women, women who follow the Lord and do what he says, regardless of what culture or insecure spiritual leaders say. And they need to step into that.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. One more thing to men, and then I do want to talk to women for a minute. I'm glad you already opened the door to that.
Yeah.
There are some men listening who have felt, I'm going to use a big word, emasculated by culture,
Yes.
by the church, by others. How can a man in that internal state step into this?
Yeah, well, we have a culture that's aggressively and strategically emasculating men.
Yep.
And you had mentioned on my podcast that up until recently, the church, well, it seems so. It's in recent times, our target in the church is men, young families with children.
Yep.
Young
Yep.
families with children, young families with children. And we've lost the focus on the men, and we focused on young families and children, and the men have left the church. And I think that we really need to change that focus and really focus more of our fiscal resources on bringing the men in, speaking the men's language, because statistically, if you get that man in, he changes things. And if you don't get that man in, the world begins to crumble. So we really need to focus there as far as our energy goes. I forgot your question.
How can a man who feels that
Okay, there it
lack
is.
of power step into this?
So again, I think one of the ways a man can step away from being emasculated, it really comes back to his wife. Honestly, when we go back to Ephesians chapter 5 and we see that men are called to love their wives 4 or 5 times, I can't remember how many times. Women are never called to love their husbands in that passage, but it says respect your husband. And so respect is earned. So a man can't come to his wife and go, you respect me, woman, I'm the man. But he needs to live a life that is worthy of respect But what I believe that passage says is, listen, the worst thing a woman can ever do is to disrespect and demean her man with her words. You can never support this family. You're not good enough. I can't believe I married you. You're a horrible father. You never do what I tell you. These things are like kicking a guy between the legs.
Yeah.
And we live in a Western culture. Eastern culture isn't like this, but Western culture, Western women, because of the society has lied to them, have this open license to like take shots at their men. And I think that is devastating to men, because when a man shuts down, he does not run to the fight with his wife. He runs into the garage. He runs into the computer and the pornography. He runs into his video games. She's got to be very careful to not, maybe disrespect is the wrong word, demean him. I think, because to me, when you demean a man, you are emasculating him.
Yep.
And so our wives need to be, and that our wives need to be very careful not to allow our children to demean her man, or anybody who around to demean her man. And so I think that's a big thing. And then for the men, here's the thing with men. If you follow Jesus, whether you're a man or a woman, you are always going to be in the minority.
Yes.
You are always going to be surrounded by a culture who opposes you. And that's how it's going to be, and it's supposed to be that way. And Jesus said it would be that way in Matthew chapter 7. We have to accept the fact that we will always be in the minority, even in Texas.
Yep.
Even in Texas, out here in Oregon, man, we live in them. We're like the remnant out here, but even in Texas, you
Yep.
are in the minority, and that needs to invigorate you to stand up against a culture that's trying to emasculate you and say, listen, I am going to have this world will feel the full weight of who I am as a man, not a male, a man.
Yep.
And the world can deal with it.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, so I just think we need some more courageous men and strong women.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up what you did about the impact of a woman's demeaning on a man from a man's perspective. It is a big deal. What I have observed is that if a man's wife is behind him, if he senses he has his wife behind him, he can go out and slay dragons. If his wife is cutting him down, it doesn't matter how much success out there is in the world. I also need to follow up. There may be some women listening who feel like their husband's bad behavior is their fault. And I do want to just verbalize, because I know my audience, that you are not responsible for your spouse's bad behavior, but you have a huge impact on your spouse.
Yes, sin is sin. We as men we are all sinners. Men, our brains are so I don't know why God did this with this thing called testosterone. We are so sexually wired. We can become a dirtbag, and that is not a woman's fault ever.
Yeah.
That is the man's problem. A man's sin is a man's sin, and the moment a man tries to defer his sin upon his woman or his job or his boss or his culture, he becomes a male. So if you sin, seek forgiveness, make it right. It's never the woman's fault. It's never, if a woman sins, it's not her husband's fault. It's her sin. Now I might have done some things to cause my wife to sin, right? To have her lose her temper and anger. But at the end of the day, it's her anger, not my anger.
That's correct.
So I would need to repent for her from like stirring it up, flaming or gaslighting or finger pointing, as she would say. But at the end of the day, that's her anger and not mine.
Yep.
So yeah, I agree 100% with it. We've just got to get rid of this guilt in the church. Romans 8:1 says there's no condemnation. So we've got to, instead of bearing this burden of shame and guilt, we need to make things right.
That's good.
How do I make it right in a marriage? My marriage is messed up. Well, how do I fix it? My sex in my marriage is not great. Well, how do I fix that? How do I change these things? What's my responsibility in the game here?
Yep. Another word to women. What would you look for in a man? If you are not married and you are looking for a man to connect with for life, we've talked about some high calling for men, and that's what you do. And we'll talk about men in the arena in a second. But to the women out there who may not have a husband but want one, what do you look for?
History.
Good.
I will say this. I'm going to say this right now. This is the thing I'm trying to change in our world. It's about one beautiful Christian woman to about, or it's about 10 beautiful Christian women to about one quality Christian man. The ratio is so off. I mean, I tell guys, Christian guys, man, if you love Jesus, I mean, you're sold out for Jesus, man, there's so many beautiful, wonderful Christian women out there. It's just amazing. But we just need more Christian men out there because they're so the pickings are so slim. But what I would tell a woman is this: don't look for a man who tells you he's a Christian. Watch him be one.
Good.
And make sure he has the history. What's his history? Does he have a history of being a man of integrity? Does he have a history of serving? Does he have a history of protecting the weak? Does he have a history of respecting his mother? You know, what is his history playing out? And if he's like got this history of being this, you know, partying, womanizing guy, you know, or, you know, he kind of selfish, tons of credit card debt, you know, not, you know, just became a Christian last Christmas or last Easter, man, I would avoid that guy. I mean, just don't allow your need or your desire for a husband to hinder what you're seeking for. I have a 26-year-old son. He's a wonderful, handsome man, college athlete, loves the Lord. He's a virgin. He hardly ever dates. I'm like, well, Colton, what's going on? He said, well, you told me to make a list, Dad, and I'm still waiting. So he just had a date with a Foursquare pastor's daughter. So we'll see what happens. But what I'm saying here is this: he made a list. And I think for a woman or a man, they need to make a list of what they want in a man and not surrender that list to their feelings.
Okay. All right.
Our feelings, once our feelings get involved, it's over.
Yep. They hook you real fast.
Yeah. Yeah, yep. They do.
In the ministry that you've been leading now for some years, among the focuses, and then I'll ask you more broadly, is helping guys connect with others. Those who have been listening to me on this podcast for a while will know that I often talk about we need connection, that as important, if you're married, as important as your spouse is, you need others. This, I think, is hard for guys to understand. You've been preaching it, Jim, for a while. Talk about what kind of connection guys need as they follow Jesus, and then how you are seeking to help with that in Men in the Arena.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think a lot of it is vernacular. So like you just said, you'll say to men, you need connection, you need relationship. Well, guys don't like that. Those phrases for guys, they kind of go, oh, connection. My wife says that all the time. I don't know what it means. So what I would say is this: women do life face to face. They look each other in the eye, they talk, they're right here. Men do life side by side. So they don't connect verbally, relationally, they connect missionally. So what guys do is they find bros that do things that are similar to them, and they connect on a deep level there. So I would say to guys, you have to find other guys that you're going to lock arms with, lock shields with, and you are going to have guys who know your chinks in your armor, who have your back and protect you. You need to have a group of 3 or 4 guys, James, Peter, and John, like Jesus had, 3 or 4 guys that will be your bros. They'll be your 2 a.m. in the morning guys. And happy is the man who has 3 or 4 friends who will die on the hill he's about to die on. And so we call those small groups. We call those teams. You can call whatever you want, but here's what it isn't, Carol. It isn't going to watch UFC with my bros or going to watch a football game with my bros and drinking beer and high-fiving. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what happens on the way to the game when you're in the car driving and asking the questions, or on the way home from the game. It's those deep conversations where you probe into each other's lives and say, hey, bro, I saw you. I had this happen about 6 months ago. My wife and I are having lunch, and we have a rule that we don't ever have public outings with opposite sex. We don't have public outings or private outings with the opposite sex. We just don't go there. And one of my friends walked into a restaurant with a female coworker to have lunch with her, and I knew that his relationship with his wife was already under tremendous duress. So I reached out to him, like, bro, what are you doing? I mean, I called him out, and it was really good for him to hear. But, you know, for a lot of times for us as men, it's calling our buddies out so we can call them up or call them in. Hey, bro, you need to go and do this thing that you're not doing. I'm calling you into that space, right? Or I'm going to call you up like, hey, man, I've got some buddies of mine going, Ramos, help us with our health. We're not in shape. I'm like, okay, let me call you up because I'm tired of calling you out. But we need to have guys that we lock shields with. And so a lot of times I would say for guys, who are the bros that you hunt with? Who are the bros you golf with? Who are the bros that you, ride motorcycles with? Who are the bros you, whatever, play pickleball with, and get those guys and be strategic about locking shields and making each other better.
That's good. Um, People who can be up in your business, who can ask you the hard questions, who will be your 2 a.m. resource when you need it. Like you said, there may be some guys who are listening who need this and don't have it. Can you tell them a bit about Men in the Arena, where they might connect with you, and this might be where they find their buddies?
Well, a lot of guys are introverted guys, are not social. We have a Facebook community that's men only with 16,000 plus men in it. And it's a great place for men to ask questions, interact on a very superficial level.
Sure.
We have many resources. We have the #1 podcast on Spotify for Christian men, which you have been on twice. And we have a lot of resources for men to learn about manhood. But we really want men to come into the space where they're actually investing in their own lives to help them become better fathers, husbands, leaders, followers of Jesus. And so we really would love to have guys plug in to our resources and have them either start or join a group of their own, or to join some kind of group in their church. I really don't care if they join our ministry. I've got 100 friends that have ministries as well that they could get involved with, but they somehow, somewhere need to get Christian resources and men to lock arms with. And they can find that at our website. It's meninthearena.org. If we don't fit your DNA, I've got many friends that I'll push you to, and they might help you. But the bottom line is not who you're growing through, it's that you're seeking to grow with other dudes.
That's good. And if you're listening or watching, check the notes. We've got links to Men in the Arena, a very active YouTube channel, and check them out on Facebook. We'll make those links available. So, Jim, this has been awesome. I am just so thrilled that we've connected in this way.
Yes.
Many, many blessings to you, and I pray maybe this isn't the end. There's God's doing something here.
It's never the end, Carol. We're super excited. I'm excited to get to know you, and you are one of our allies now. So in every book you write, you better be sending it my way for an interview, and whatever I can do to serve your ministry. I love what you're doing. I love your kingdom mindedness. I love your boldness, your authenticity, and your power. And I wish more women had that. God bless you.
And bless you. Well, whether you are a man or a woman, I hope that was both challenging and encouraging, letting you see what you can do to make things better, and you really can. Do check the links under this video. We've got the links to Jim's ministry, YouTube, his podcast, a lot of really, really good stuff there. Connect with his research, especially if you're a guy and you don't have a few buddies with you. Jim was talking about that. You need a few guys shoulder to shoulder, walking through the hard things in life. If you don't have that, especially, that would be a great reason to connect with Men in the Arena. I also want to just share once again about my recently released book, Sexpectations: Reframing Your Good and Not So Good Stories About God, Love, and Relationships. Jim graciously had me on his podcast recently talking about this. Yeah, we talked to men about sex on Men in the Arena podcast, and it was a great conversation. You might want to check that out as well. But go check out yoursexpectations.com, and you can find a bunch of related resources along with information about the book. You'll find some free downloads, get a free chapter. We've got a quiz, we've got a 30-day devotional available. So a lot of helpful resources there. yoursexpectations.com. And I would love to hear from you. If you want to leave me a comment under this video, I read them all. You can also come over to drcarolministries.com, leave me a confidential comment, and I read every one of those as well, and I would love to hear from you. And now, until next time, may God bless you.